Welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. Can I take the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, but I think we are actually all here. So I'll move on to the record of the meeting on the 11th of November. Can I sign those minutes?
Great.
Thank you. I have no urgent matters. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I have spoken to legal. I have had communication in the past with the applicants with regards to emails via the councillors in Gillingham North, and they have been passed on to Mandy. But I haven't sat and met the individuals personally and discussed it. It was a pure movement in passing it on to individuals.
Right. Good afternoon. We're obviously here this afternoon for a matter involving driving Miss Daisy. You can see our names. Perhaps you would like to introduce yourselves.
Certainly. My name is... We need to use right. Yeah. My name is Greg Blessard. I am the UK Chairman and Chief Executive of the Driving Miss Daisy Group of Companies, and I'm here to work with...
Once it press once, it comes on and it's live from there. Apologies.
Start that again. That's going on the cutting room floor. Yeah, my name is Greg Blessard. I'm the UK Chairman, Chief Executive of the group of companies of which Driving Miss Daisy is part, and I'm here to offer background and support to the local operation here in Chatham in the Medway area.
Hi, my name's Danielle. I'm the daughter and work for Driving Miss Daisy in Medway.
Okay. Yes. So, I'm Lorraine Domingue. I'm also the director, and we bought the franchise for Driving Miss Daisy.
I'm Frederick Domingue. We own a franchise here in Medway. And we approach Councillor Adam Price and Dan MacDonald to represent us, and because we were having problem with licensing in order to operate properly.
Right, so I can take then to page 5, and Mrs. Francis, perhaps you could explain the background.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise members of the request from Driving Miss Daisy for the drivers wishing to work for them to sit the private hire knowledge test, which is for restricted drivers, which is for the home to school transport contract work only, instead of the full private hire knowledge test. Driving Miss Daisy is a franchise organisation that specialises in taking people out and about in their communities around the UK where extra time and support and companionship is needed. Their clients range from younger children with autism, for example, to older persons with Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's. They also support people with learning difficulties and a number of mobility issues, including visual impairments, people living with mental health issues, and those who may have simply had to give up their driving licence. The ground for their request is that they are a bespoke company that carries out a companionship service with a wheelchair vehicle and that they are not a taxi service. The information provided by Driving Miss Daisy in Appendix A confirms, however, that fundamentally and irrespective of the additional services that they provide, they receive requests from customers for journeys which are pre-booked in advance. They provide a quote for the journeys and then charge and collect money for them, thereby providing a licensable hire and reward service. A local authority is responsible for licensing drivers and vehicles providing a hire and reward service from pick-up and drop-off points only, and the legislation relates to licensing drivers and vehicles to transport passengers only. The companionship element in itself is not a licensable activity and therefore not a matter for consideration when we determine applications for licensing. This element of their licensable hire and reward service is the same standard of hire and reward service as any private hire driver and therefore not deemed to be exceptional. We must apply fairness and equality to all of our applicants and existing licensed drivers. All Medway licensed drivers have had safeguarding and disability awareness training in accordance with the regulatory standards and our Hackney Carriage and private hire policy. It is considered that allowing Driving Miss Daisy drivers to only sit and pass the restricted private hire knowledge test would undermine the justification and requirement for all other private hire drivers to sit and pass the full knowledge test, resulting in widespread challenge from the private hire trades and a consequent reduction in local standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Francis. Are you going to put the case for the application?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'm more than happy to do so. What's been stated so far is absolutely correct. Driving Miss Daisy as a business is there to enable anybody, no matter what their physical or mental condition, if they are living with any form of chronic or acute illness, to get out and about and enjoy their lives. Whether those are people who are lonely and elderly, whether they have frailty and mobility issues, or whether they are post-operative. We do a huge amount of work, which I'll come on to with the NHS now, in terms of the implementation of discharge services and discharge management for NHS acute hospitals, and of which in excess of 60% of our revenue is non-driving. We provide that companionship and specialist care service to people to keep them out and keep them safe when they're out and about. To give you an example of that, for example, we have kidney dialysis companions, where if a patient is undergoing or a client is undergoing kidney dialysis on a regular basis, the issues that they face when they are out and about in the community or getting out to enjoy their lives are bespoke to them in terms of the medical issues that they may face, which are different to other patients. So we have specialities. We have a team of doctors, very senior doctors, as part of our advisory panel, because the aim of the game is to enable people, no matter what their condition, to enjoy life. It's as simple as that. You know, they don't want to be out and, you know, stuck in at home and not being able to get out and enjoy their life. For some of the work that we do, we are required to transport somebody from A to B as part of that service. That in itself is not our raison d'etre, but it is an enabler. And for us to be able to do that, we have designed very specialist vehicles. They are the only ones like them on the road, designed by our medics and engineers. The colour scheme of the vehicles has been designed to try and reduce anxiety levels for people with dementia. The inside of the vehicles has been designed to enable anybody to get in and out easily and travel safely and in comfort anywhere they want to go. So whilst the assertion that, yes, you know, that element of the journey is similar to other private hire and taxi companies, I would argue that the speciality of the vehicles and the training and expertise of our companion drivers, because we have extensive training, which is just short of paramedic training. So, as I mentioned earlier, we provide services to South Central Ambulance Service, now Oxford University Hospitals, Queen Alexandra Hospitals, several hospitals in the West Midlands, and shortly to Liverpool Hospital. The training of our companion drivers sits way above anything that the private hire or taxi industry would or any licensing authorities would demand. We work in 56 locations around the country. We operate in a way where we carry in the region of 40 operators' licences for individual franchisees. We also run regional licences for several areas where we have multiple areas running through a single operational centre, whereby the operators' licensed vehicles, drivers and all the calls are handled in a single location. And we are growing in conjunction with the NHS across the UK. The client base that we operate with are not ones that just ring up for a service. We do not do that. We undertake risk assessments, we undertake pre-meetings with the clients, because they all have their own individual issues and problems that we need to be aware of when it comes to transporting them safely, and then dealing with them safely when they are out and about and doing things, or shopping, or going visiting places or relatives, whatever it may be. So our argument on this would be that we carry restricted licences in multiple licensing authorities around the country. We have some licensing authorities that do not require us to be licensed at all because of the wording of the Act in terms of if your primary role is there to provide other services, and driving and charging for those services is a smaller part of it, then you don't necessarily need to carry an operator's licence, and we do have that with several councils. So our view on this and our position is one that we are more than happy with to be licensed, run under the local council's operator's licence, both the vehicles, the operators and the drivers. But the issues that we have around undertaking detailed knowledge checks, we never use them because of the types of patients who are contracted into us on a regular basis, and that our need to understand how to get somebody up from the commanders to get them home on a Saturday night isn't there, because we don't offer those services at all. So we do argue that the transportation is an enabler for our service. It is not our service, but enables us to transport very vulnerable people in comfort and safety when we are looking after them and getting them out and about in their communities.
Thank you. Mrs. Francis, would you like to ask any questions of the applicant?
No, I'm fine, thank you very much. I have no questions. Thank you.
Colleagues, questions? No, I'm sorry, Councillor.
No, I was wanting to address the meeting of the Ward Council.
I'm not sure
I
that
did write to you this morning.
I don't think that applies in this instance. This is not a planning committee.
It doesn't normally, but you could do it at Chair's discretion if you wanted to hear.
Yes, for those people who don't know me, my name's Councillor Adam Price, and I'm the ward councillor for this family here. They live within my ward, and they approached me about a year ago, I think it was, and I've met them in their offices at Rainham, and they live in the Hazelmere area estate. I was very impressed when I went to meet with both of the main licensees, franchisees, about the nature of the operation which they run. I'm particularly mindful that we're going through the most serious winter pressures that the NHS has ever experienced before. And of course, Medway Council is different to Gravesham Council, where our legal services are based, because we are a unitary authority. So we actually provide, when I say we, because I'm a councillor, I'm now talking about Medway Council, we work in partnership with Medway Hospital. And I see that driving Miss Daisy, if they're allowed to continue into and to be able to operate in the way that they feel that they need to, will be very important in terms of smooth discharges home. Because these drivers are, as we've heard, trained to almost paramedic level of knowledge and expertise, and they won't just drop someone off from hospital. They will go in and they will check that they've got heating. They will go in and they will check that they've got food. Obviously, if there's family support, they will check that they are aware that the relative is coming home and everything. So driving is only part of the function which they actually provide. So if we are serious as a Medway Council in terms of supporting our NHS colleagues, then we need to give every support possible that we can to a bespoke organisation, which we're very fortunate to have within the Medway area. As I understand it, there is some talk of maybe if they're not able to get the type of licence which they are applying for, and to avoid having their drivers to have to sit the full test which any other taxi operation within the boundaries of Medway Council are obliged to do. We've heard that they don't use that knowledge. The drivers they need to recruit, they recruit primarily for their health and social care aptitudes, working with vulnerable, physically vulnerable and mentally vulnerable residents within the Medway area. So we've already heard that there are some authorities that don't require the bespoke service, which is driving Miss Daisy, to have any licence at all. And then we're also mindful of the fact that obviously we've heard that they are prepared to conform to the licensing within the Medway area, but not on the full licence, but the restricted one. And that will enable them to be able to recruit the staff that they need. Primarily, we've heard it's about 60% of what they do is health and social care. Driving is an incidental thing. You can't just phone up Driving Miss Daisy and get a cab like you would if you were phoning up for Uber or for CNC cabs or anything like that. All of, as I understand it, most of their journeys are pre-planned from as little as a day in advance to often weeks, months, even years in advance. These are individuals who want to care, and part of the care which they can provide is to enable people to be able to get out and about within their community. So I would just urge you that the very easy thing for you to do would be to say, no, they've got to have the full licence, because of the legal risk, etc. There are particular needs for this operation to be able to provide the service which we would want them to be able to continue to provide within the Medway area, because it's a very valuable part of our winter pressures and health and social care moving forward, to be able to support them in this way and not require them to have the full knowledge test, but to enable them to concentrate on those health and social care needs, which is what these physically and mentally vulnerable patients within our community need. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Right, colleagues, do you have questions for the applicant? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say it's very clear. It's very clear you do a wonderful job in the community. That's very clear from what you've said and from what I know from what even Mandy's presented to us and has shown. We are aware. I suppose I just wanted to touch on a few things around. You say about demand services. So it's about that demand. It's not just 3 or 4 regular spots, is it? It's depending on what the client rings that call centre, and then could go to a number of places across Medway. Am I right in saying that? It depends on where they want to travel to.
Just to confirm that, in terms of the local services that we support, then we can take a client anywhere that they want to go. So that could be on holiday to Scotland, where we provide a completely accompanied chaperone service. It could be for a hospital appointment, where we would go in with them. We stay with them throughout their entire journey through the hospital, ensuring that they get to the consultants' appointments. If they need to go for blood tests or scans or anything like that, we stay with them. And more importantly, we will feed back and coordinate everything that needs to happen with the GPs, with the family, and with their local services, because that's a huge gap in discharge management and management with the hospitals. Is just, and I went through this when my parents were alive, just trying to find out what the consultants had said and what needs to happen next. So we coordinate and manage that entire process on their behalf. So it's everything from that through to, we did take an elderly gentleman that had was no longer mobile. We took him for a Somme battlefield tour because he'd always wanted to do it. So it's that complete range of services. And as I say, the transportation is an enabler when we need it to get from A to B. And a big chunk of our services does not require transportation at all. So does that answer your question on that in terms of it not just being a local?
No, that's really helpful. And can I just ask about the charging element? So you've already just said, because I think it's not confusing, because like you said, you do a great job. There's the transport and there's the companion element, isn't it? And the companion, the carer, I want to use carer in a very loose term, because, you know, a lot of your, I'm sure a lot of your clients are very independent, don't need that carer, but I'm using that in a very, so with the charging element, we're not just charging for the transport, you're charging for the companionship as well. Is it two different elements when you charge? I'm just trying to get whether you're charging for the transport is one small element, and that's the transport charge, or whether it's a whole package of companionship.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We charge by the tasking that we've been undertaking. We don't split out transport and companionship. It is charged by the task, by the job in hand. And as I say, that may not require any transport, or it may require significant transport. It varies from case to case. But in all cases, they are booked, and as the councillor said earlier, we have bookings into next year, into 2024, with many individuals, because it's about getting them to regular appointments, or just enabling them to get out and have fun.
Sorry, Chair, just a couple more. With regards to your selection process, it's just getting it clear. So when people ring through to you and register, you have your regulars, you could have a one-off. Do you have a procedure where they have to register with your national organisation? They have to be, you have to know who they are, etc., and be clear on that?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So they will call our centralised number, which goes through a specialist team of advisors. And you know, to put it bluntly, they sort the wheat from the chaff, and if you need a taxi or a private hire company, then we'll push you on and tell you to ring a taxi or a private hire company. So we will only deal with individuals and families where they need our specialist companion and specialist care services, not just because you want to get home on a Saturday night from the pub after watching the football.
Okay, so just to be clear, it is, you will pass people on to taxi services, etc., if needed. And my final one is, you did mention about your vehicles and how specialist your vehicle is. Can you just touch on that, just to finish with me? Can you just touch on that, how different that is? Because we have private hire, we have private hire vehicles that are wheelchair accessible, etc. And we do have plenty of, well, I'd say all our drivers are very capable and really good at handling clients from all different, with all different disabilities, for example, those that have got those cars. Can you just touch on that a little bit, what the difference is on your...
Absolutely. In November, we completed our 500,000th engagement with clients across the country. And there's a huge amount I know. My profession, historically, I was a chartered engineer. The importance of the vehicles cannot be understated. So the external elements of it all, as I mentioned earlier, we were designed with our medical team to attempt to reduce anxiety levels for some of our clients who live with dementia. Likewise, internally, it's really important with the inside of the vehicles that if somebody is living with dementia, that when you open the door, you've got levels of contrast, that it doesn't look just like that they are kind of looking down into a black hole. Likewise, if an individual needs to travel in the wheelchair, then we have all the mechanical aids, winches, everything that goes along with it, as well as specialist wheelchairs that have been crash tested and enable people to travel distances, if needs be, in comfort in the wheelchair. The internal seating are all, have been designed in terms of infection control, so we can clean them easily, and we deep clean the vehicles on a regular basis. That was incredibly important, as you can imagine, throughout the COVID era, where deep clean and we operate to ambulance service standards on that in terms of their policies and procedures for the deep cleaning of vehicles. But even modern vehicles, just trying to get, and I'll use this as an analogy because it works quite well, but when my mother was alive, she was very small, very frail, and just physically getting in and out of a car was difficult. So we went through the process in the front seats of removing bolsters at the side of it and extending the seat towards the door sill. so that if she was reversing up to the vehicle with a frame, walking frame, she could easily sit on it because the seat was lowered and she'd swing her legs in. We get on some of our vehicles, specialist vehicles, we have the doors that open further so that people with mobility issues can physically transfer and get in more easily. The location of handles and grab handles has been changed, and this has all been built around extensive expertise over the last 8 years and over 500,000 engagements, where we're looking at it just 1% at a time. Every little improvement we can make to that vehicle, then we implement. We have some of our vehicles where the front passenger seat is electrically lowerable. And again, it's all about being able to enable individuals, no matter what their condition, to travel in comfort. So they are unique vehicles. We're going through a redesign of the inside just in terms of the colour schemes. And again, that's working with our medics and Alzheimer's Society to get the internal colour schemes right, so that again it's looking at people who are living with dementia and reducing anxiety levels on that, because that causes us that causes a lot of problems for these people. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Thank you for that. Could you possibly tell the committee what normal, quote, taxi drivers do that your driving mistakes drivers do not do?
Just so I can understand that question properly,
Yeah.
so I can give you an answer. So your general private hire oblique taxi drivers. Yeah. Well, irrespective of the kind of the role of private hire and taxi and the legislation that is applicable to that in terms of taxi ranks and hackney carriage licences and private hire, etc. If we start with the bookings element of it all, we find across the country that the vast majority of private hire operators and vehicles do not like taking people in wheelchairs. Very simply from that side of things. It does not fit the model of private hire and taxis because of the time taken of getting people in and out of the vehicles and the care that's needed to do that. I can quote example after example across the country of private hire companies and taxi companies just really shying away from taking anybody in wheelchairs. They may take the booking but not turn up, and we have a whole book, an encyclopedia of examples of that. In terms of what we do over and above taxis, which is all around the care, if you look at just take the training elements of our companion drivers as opposed to private hire and taxi, we far exceed any of the requirements of taxi and private hire drivers, both in terms of, we talked about safeguarding. Well, we work to safeguarding adults and children's levels 1, 2 and 3, in terms of our emergency first aid, in terms of moving and handling people in a social environment, dementia awareness, dementia champions, slips, trips and falls and Rita in the homes in terms of ensuring that we're safeguarding against that. Food hygiene, because we will often be providing food and drinks, etc. within the own home. So if you took it and just looked at the very basics of private hire and taxi, then if we have a client in the car, then we are way in advance in terms of any of their capability. I won't say capabilities, but in what's expected of those people. Even to the point where one of the elements that we insist on is that all our drivers need to sit in a wheelchair in the back of the vehicle and spend time as a passenger. We have trackers on the vehicles that enable us to make sure that we are complying with all the legislation. It pings up alerts if anybody's going over the speed limit, if people are cornering too hard, etc. So we have the ability to provide that level of oversight. And so all in all, in terms of the service that we offer and how we offer the service, it is significantly very far removed from anything that the private hire and taxi industry offer.
Okay. Yeah, what I was really trying to get from you, ways of differentiating between ordinary taxi drivers and your drivers in terms of what they actually do, but you don't want to do or don't need to do.
What we don't do is deal with the, and this probably isn't the right phrasing, but the general public. Yeah. We have very specific client base that we have conducted needs assessments, risk assessments, medical assessments on. We don't deal with people that just ring up wanting a trip from A to B as a normal private hire or taxi company would do. And we would always pass those over to taxi companies to enable them to do it, or just provide them with a telephone number. And we do that across the country.
Now, your drivers are obviously very skilled, very caring and very dedicated people. Are they salaried, or are they paid by the meter, or what?
No, our drivers operate all on salaries. They're all contracted in. We don't offer
So they're
0 hour salaries.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. And thank you for bringing this to us today. Obviously, we've heard from Councillor Price, you are very much a very bespoke company providing a very specialist service, which we appreciate that. And again, your answer to Councillor Kemp in terms of the, your drivers and what that can provide, they're not just taxi drivers, are they? They're much more than that, they're specialist people. So if today we felt that we should go along with the council's policy and insist your drivers do undertake the full knowledge test, what impact would that have on your operation?
It would have a significant impact locally in terms of how the issue that we're having locally is just recruiting the right people with the right caring mindset to come and be able to work for us. So the service that we offer is being significantly curtailed at the moment because of the level of the knowledge test and what's involved in that, because we don't need that anywhere in the country. So in terms of how we operate as a business, as I mentioned earlier, we have regional licences. So Bromley, for example, just not far up the road from here, operates from our Portsmouth operator's licence. The impact that it has on that is it creates a significantly higher level of complexity for us as a business. It doesn't stop us fully operating, but also what it does do is reduces and significantly slows down our ability to provide the services to people in the local area and the local hospitals.
Can I bring you back more specifically to Medway to find out how many vehicles do you actually have running in Medway?
We currently have 2, and because one of those is licensed, one of them is not licensed yet, and that operates as a general vehicle for the business. But we're looking to grow that significantly and rapidly in order to cope with the demand that we get, because we know that we're turning a huge amount of business down because it comes through our centralised call centre, and we can't provide the services because we are, at the moment, struggling to recruit companion drivers because of having to take the knowledge test.
So you're operating 2 vehicles. How many drivers do you actually have at the moment?
We only have 1 operating at the moment.
Okay. And I think your response to my colleague is that person is salaried, not a volunteer.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Can you just explain a little bit more about the booking system? Because I note you have a very detailed resume here of clients' needs. If somebody just simply phones up and says, I'm in a wheelchair but I want to go out for the day, do you go through all of that procedure, or would you just go and pick them up?
No, we would still go through a risk assessment. The fact that they're in a wheelchair is part of it, but we would need to understand if they had specific medical issues, what the issues were around any medication. There's a whole raft of things which can impact the individual, notwithstanding the fact that they may or may not be in a wheelchair. So we would go through a standard risk assessment in terms of making sure that we're providing the right type and level of service to that individual.
Yeah.
Just a final one, following on from my colleague's question around the Medway area and your journeys. Do you know a rough percentage of the journeys, the bookings you take for Medway that go out of, straight out of Medway, for example, rather than travelling around the Medway towns? I mean, you don't have to have all that detail now, but I'm just wondering what that is.
The Medway is a unique, not a unique case. The case with Medway at the moment is that we are sitting on a large amount of suppressed demand. So we're turning a lot of business away from individuals that want to get out and about. And probably 50-50, I would say, as a guess at the moment. I would have to do the data analysis of the calls on our system. But as it stands at the moment, because the recruitment of companion drivers is significantly curtailed because of the knowledge test, then unfortunately we are turning a large, well, the vast majority of enquiries that come into the business for Medway, we're having to turn those down. Many of the ones that we do have, and I can quote instances where we have dealt with and had to turn down clients who are terminally ill and have wanted to go to their granddaughter's wedding. Well, we haven't been able to do that because of the lack of companion drivers to do it. So it is having a significant impact on the most vulnerable in your area.
And can you just tell me the safety element? So obviously we have a really thorough licensing, like other boroughs, but we definitely do in Medway, a really good thorough licensing procedure. Our drivers are checked on, their vehicles are checked on. You know, we demand a lot from our drivers. We ask them if anything changes, if they've been going for, you know, they've been done for fines or anything more serious than that. What sort of checks do you do, for example, on your vehicle, bar the daily ones, but what sort of checking do you do of your drivers and your vehicles on a regular basis?
We have a system that tracks all of this. So we have a compliance team that ensures that all the requirements of the local authorities in terms of DBS, enhanced DBS checks are done. We then take them through a training schedule, which involves emergency first aid at work, safeguarding adults and children, levels 1, 2 and 3, moving and handling in social care, slips, falls, risks. Oh, cracky, it's a big long list of training that we have in there. And we check on those, the compliance team are checking on those regularly. If anything happens in terms of complaints, we have a complaints procedure, which and a team of people that handle any complaints. In the 500,000 jobs that we've done, we have had 3 complaints. One actually was for somebody in Bromley because they were complaining we were travelling a bit too slowly because we just picked somebody up from hospital and post-operative and we were getting them home and getting them settled in. One was for the use of a mobile phone, which immediately instigated a disciplinary procedure for that companion driver because we do not allow the use of mobile phones in the vehicles. And one actually was somebody inquiring about the service and you know, we're saying, well, you know, why can't we do this? So out of that percentage of complaints that we've had, it's incredibly small, and it is an area that we are very proud of in terms of our delivery of service. The driving assessment, the organisation responsible for our policies and procedures are Hampshire Police. So they have a charity called the Blue Lamp Trust, which operates out of Eastleigh, and they've been instrumental in the development of our vehicle and driver policies. We have to report and check both daily in terms of lights and the usual types of things these days. Used to call them first parade checks, but also on a weekly basis in terms of the physical condition of the vehicle, both inside and outside, the cleanliness, the deep cleaning, etc. So we have a very rigorous, thorough process for ensuring compliance with the driving standards, with vehicle standards, and with the policies and processes of driving mistakes as a whole. Does that answer your question satisfactorily?
Could I come back and just ask you, are your passengers always accompanied by somebody else?
No, they don't need to be. They will be in some instances, but 75% of our journeys will be with an individual rather than an individual and a carer. If we need to take a carer or some form of chaperone, if we're dealing with children that have got special needs, where we do a lot of work with schools, with special needs schools, then we can, and we are geared up to do that. But the majority of the work will be with an individual rather than an individual and a carer or a passenger. The reason for that is the training levels of our companions. You know, they are there as carers and companions for that person and are trained to that standard. So we don't, unlike just being a transport service, when we're out with somebody, as I mentioned earlier, then we ensure that that companion has the right level of skills to be able to cope with any eventuality that may come their way when they're out with a client.
Where you're talking about youngsters with special needs, I'm assuming you don't do home to school transport. This is for specific other. Okay.
No, we do a lot of contracted work with schools in terms of getting individuals in and out of schools. It creates its own problems purely from a business management perspective because it ties up a significant number of vehicles and companion drivers at the school times, getting them in and out on specific times. But we do carry a high amount of special needs school contracts, specifically working with individuals and families where you know the child may be in a wheelchair or may have certain medical or mental requirements that mean we're the only people really that can get them in and out safely.
What would your optimum number of vehicles in Medway be?
That's a very good question. We don't really have... What we find is that we do not need very many clients to keep a single vehicle and companion driver occupied on a full-time basis. You know, if one client takes us out for the day, then the number of vehicles needs to grow accordingly. So it really depends. We have a single franchise in Keighley, in West Yorkshire, where I'm from, and he is conducting over 1,000 engagements a month. He operates 5 vehicles and has 5 pure companion-only employees as well, that just work with clients in their own home and get them out and get them a bit of exercise, etc. with it all. So we don't really have an optimal because it all depends on the individuals and the demand that they have for the services.
Thank you.
May I add something, please? Must emphasize that we do take certain clients with disability to farms on a regular basis. We've made a council contract, and we do take them to day centres as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry. If you had a sudden surge, say you say you've only got one driver in Medway at the moment. If you had, say, 3 or 4 requests on the same day, would you necessarily draw in drivers from other areas?
It depends on the local area. So where we are in Medway, we don't have anybody that's close enough to be able to do that. The next franchise we have operating is in Bromley. So it becomes difficult to do that. Unfortunately, the level of demand that we have for our service across the country is such that we are, I'm not prepared to compromise the quality of the service that we offer. The approach that we take on this is if I would not trust one of our companion drivers with my parents or my children, then we will not let them come anywhere near a driving Miss Daisy uniform, which again, you know, is different to private hire and taxi in that all our companion drivers are uniformed. When it comes to managing peaks and troughs, unfortunately we have times when we have to turn clients down. But what we find is that because of the quality of the service that we offer, then we will have many clients now that if they want to go somewhere or if they want to arrange an appointment, then they will leave it for us to arrange that on their behalf so that we can fit it in with the timetable and the availability of our companion drivers. But we do unfortunately have peaks that we cannot cope with the demand on, in which case we need to turn those clients down.
So in that case, what would be your business plan then to cope with a sudden surge in Medway? You know, you've got one at the moment. If you know, what would be the criteria to have 2 drivers or 3 drivers? and what will happen in the interim?
Well, we have modelling techniques in at head office that enable us to, at what point do we start looking at bringing on a second vehicle, etc. We do have a waiting list in Medway that we can't service at the moment because we can't get the companion drivers to service that waiting list. So on the assumption that the restricted licensing is acceptable, then we can immediately start recruiting companion drivers who are not willing to work for us under the existing arrangements and under the full licensing and knowledge test, and we can start bringing those clients into play and start servicing their requirements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, moving on. Have you any questions for our licensing team? No. Members' questions, yes, Councillor MacDonald.
Mandy, thanks very much for a really good paper, and you know, I'll start off by saying, of course, we're here representing all the drivers. Of course, we are, and we've got to have fairness with our taxi industry, and we always have had, and I think that's really important. The restricted test element part. If the applicant was going down that element, is there a certain issue with them just doing a restricted test? Is it fully the chargeable element that's the issue here?
Yeah, it basically there are two types of private hire tests. We have two knowledge tests. One which is for hackney carriage and private hire, and depending on the pass mark is whichever licence that driver is then offered. The restricted is for home-to-school transport contract work only, and that is for KCC or Medway Council issued contracts to operators to undertake their school-run journeys. And the knowledge test for that, because these journeys the contracts last for a period of 5 years, they have bespoke journeys for each of those contracts, which does not change. And they have nominated drivers, etc., and the vehicles to do that. So they are not tested on the places of interest or routes, and that is the clear difference.
With regards to the companion part, and we've heard about the registration element where they're not exactly going down the street and being waved down or on the ranks. When it's a companion element, it's very difficult right on the spot now to try and place them as the same as the homeschool transport, but they're a specialist individual on that vehicle, and they are pre-booked and planned in advance, i.e. the hospital visits, the seaside ones, etc. That would still, it'd be something the committee would have to decide, I suppose, because it still wouldn't come under that restricted element because you'd have researched. Okay, yeah, so I'm answering your question for you. Is there any other specialist organisations like this operating within the Medway area that are similar to this?
Not this particular model, no. And we would have the same approach should anybody else be coming in. And you know what our issue is that whilst we commend the service provision. And it is superb.
Yeah.
From a licensing perspective, the authority is responsible for licensing the hire and reward element. So the companionship, the part where they are going over and above and beyond, is not a matter for us to actually make any determination on. Sure. You know, we have our existing drivers have had safeguarding training, disability awareness training, and they also undertake the DSA assessments, which is given by the Blue Lamp Trust. So, you know, Medway Council does have a very high standard expected of their drivers, and you know, these standards is something that we wouldn't want to compromise on.
No, that's great. And the final one for me is around the contract element. So, I'm not asking you to change your business plan here, but if it was a contracted element, so when they've got clients that enter into a contract, it's a contracted element of transport, would that be different then? Because would that then enter into a restricted area? Because obviously if they're contracted by, for example, if they had a contract with a hospital, contract with the schools, if they had contracts with their clients, so they're not out catching fares on the street, but they had contracts, would that change the element or not?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
The Road Safety Act made a change. In the past, many years ago, if you operated a business that was on a contract basis, albeit whether it was going to be a contract for one day or a contract for a week, then that vehicle, for the purpose of that contract, would not be able to be used for any other purpose other than that contract. And you couldn't have multiple contracts for the same vehicle at different times. Then it would be exempt from licensing. The Road Safety Act did away with that because it was abused an awful lot and it became quite very difficult in terms of enforcement and regulation. So, no, again, unless they could operate, I would say, using that one vehicle for a specified minimum of 24 hours on one day, I think it would be highly unlikely.
Yeah, thank you. The full knowledge test, how long does it take a driver on average to learn the full knowledge test, and what is approximately the percentage pass rate of the full knowledge test?
It's a very difficult one to actually give data on. What I can say is that the majority of people, when they sit the full knowledge test, they don't fail on the routes or prominent places. That isn't the prime failure rate. The prime failure rate is on the legislation, highway code, and the taxi policy, which to us was always a bit of a surprise because you've got documentation there you can learn from. I would say on an average, we hold the test once a month. And in terms of, I think for Medway, they hold 10 places for Hackney Carriage and private hire. And I think you probably get a pass rate of an average of around about 3, which is not unheard of. Quite often you get people that will fail the first time, and it's because they want to sit it to get a feel for what's expected, although we do provide a lot of guidance on the website. But they sort of take it just to get a bit of a feel for it. Okay.
Mrs. Francis, can you just perhaps give an indication of what a permission in this instance could actually lead to with other similar applications?
If it was decided to grant a restricted licence for this particular company, then we would have to have the same approach applied for other companies that came to us in the future. So whilst it might not be something that's going to happen overnight, you know, with the competition market the way it is, we could even have our own taxi service provision if they caught on to this, that they would want to maybe try and offer up the same type of service and expect the same. What also does concern me is whether or not we would get challenges from our own existing licensed trade. Because as I said, you know, what my prime concern is that whilst I commend the company for the service provision, which is very admirable, it's from a local authority point of view, our concern is the hire and reward element. And with that, the hire and reward element, the transport service provision, in our view, is no different than that provided by a private hire driver taking a wheelchair person, assisting with loading and unloading. It's the companionship element that they do, which is over and above.
Just to be clear, in my own mind, the current restrictive licences are specific in the route that the person takes.
Absolutely, and the contracts are for a period of 5 years.
Right, that clears that section.
Yeah, I ask something, please. Is there different types of restricted license?
I'm sorry, Fred, I couldn't understand what you said. Could you repeat that?
Is there different types of restricted license?
Is there different types of restricted licence?
No, not anymore. We have historically, from Medway Council, before we had a change in the taxi policy, we had ones which were for airport runs only, or executive car hire, but they're no longer issued, but we have to continue with the existing until the lifetime of that licence, but we don't issue any other ones. Is that clear?
But we have a registered licence although I have passed the full knowledge test, I have a restricted license.
You have a restricted licence for the vehicle, not for the driver.
Why?
Your vehicle licence is a restricted licence, which was based on the fact that you provide an exceptional vehicle. And within the policy, that's explained in the report.
But there was also a restriction on risk assessment, etc., because we do a full risk assessment before when to take a client.
This is just for clarity, if I can just explain to members. Driving Miss Daisy contacted us a number of years ago before they came into Medway, and wanted to know whether or not we would exempt the vehicle from our vehicle specifications, which in accordance with the policy allowed us to have discretion for exceptional vehicles. And as this vehicle was deemed exceptional, it didn't need to colour with the. It did not need to comply with the colour specifications set by Medway Council of red with the white checkered stripes. So they were able to have the vehicle wrapped in the Blue Daisy colours. Because of that, there was and is an exception on a condition on the licence which states that it is for the vehicle is to be used for a companionship service provision only, and that's just based on the vehicle. What we have to bear in mind is that there are two separate licences: the vehicles, and the vehicles comply with the vehicle requirements, and then we licence the drivers, and the drivers must comply with the driver licence requirements. I hope that clarifies.
So just to be clear, you have a licence for the vehicle, but you need another licence for somebody to drive the vehicle. Yep.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Mrs. Francis, would you like to sum up?
I don't think I have anything further to add, actually, Chair. We do acknowledge that the service provision that Driving Miss Daisy provides is exceptional, and it exceeds beyond the hire and reward element. However, we are only concerned with the hire and reward element when we're making our determinations for licensing. Our drivers across the board, Hackney Carriage private hire and restricted private hire drivers for home to school transport contract work, all have had safeguarding training, disability awareness training. They've had the DSA assessments carried out by the Blue Lamp Trust, and this is all in accordance with our policy. The fact that they do provide an exceptional service, as I said, it isn't a matter for us to consider, and we believe that the driver should comply with the requirements as that of any private hire driver. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to sum up?
Yes, thank you very much indeed from that. We do find it somewhat of an anomaly that the vehicle carries restricted plates, and therefore in the general perception of the industry and the public, this is a specific service which isn't the normal taxi private hire service. As I say, across the country, we deal with this with licensing authorities, and in general, with the licensing authorities, they either exempt us from the need of a licence, or we do not need to do the private hire knowledge tests. Portsmouth Council, where we are based, our head office is in Portsmouth, then they exempt us from the plates as well, and none of our companion drivers need to do a knowledge test for them. As I said, areas like Bromley are licensed through Portsmouth. So whilst it's inconvenient and difficult for us in terms of getting the vehicles, the driver's licence through Portsmouth, they can operate under the Portsmouth operator's licence, quite satisfactorily. And consequently, they don't need to do a Portsmouth private hire knowledge test to be able to do so. So you know, we do find it a bit of an anomaly, and the driving and vehicle licensing, you know, what everybody sees is a restricted license on a vehicle. And so the argument that it will cause problems with the private hire industry, in 8 years and 500,000 engagements, we have not found that anywhere in the country.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to leave while the committee gives some thought to this issue. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, could I just...
It's all right, mine's on. I'll switch my... Would it be easier for you if it comes in writing? Because I don't know how long my colleagues are going to take to discuss it. It's a matter for you. You can either wait or we can do it as a written.
Really, it depends on you. If you require any further input from myself, I'm more than happy to. I've driven across from Bristol for this meeting. Certainly, my colleagues here will be here, so that if it takes a period of time to come to a decision on this, then I think that would be fine. If you need me again, then I'm more than happy to wait. Otherwise, if there's no extra value I can add to the decision-making process, then I will hit the road and try and get round London and get back to Bristol before midnight.
If you'd like to wait, I can't guarantee that it will be within the next half an hour, the next hour. I don't know. Okay. Thank you. are waiting. The committee have given some thought to this, and the decision is that they're minded to approve the application for a restricted licence, subject to appropriate conditions, which will be conveyed to Driving Miss Daisy in writing in due course. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.